The storm came without warning. The sky cracked open above the Georgia fields, pouring rain thick as smoke over the empty road. Lila Brown gripped the steering wheel tighter, her wipers swiping furiously, but the road was nothing more than a blur of water and trembling light. She shouldn't have taken the back road not this late, not alone, but she needed to breathe, to escape the suffocating dinner table, where her parents had once again reminded her that her life was not her own. A flash of lightning, and then the tires lost grip. The car spun, skidding across the slick asphalt before plunging into the muddy ditch. The world tilted, the engine hissed, and Lila's heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird. For a moment, there was only rain. And then footsteps. A figure approached through the curtain of storm, tall, broad-shouldered, soaked to the bone. He moved with the calm precision of someone who had seen chaos before and learned to control it. His flannel shirt clung to his chest, his jaw shadowed with stubble, eyes hidden beneath the brim of a rain-dark cap. "Stay still," he said, his voice low, deep, the kind that didn't ask for permission, only gave direction. Before she could speak, he opened the driver's door and helped her out, his hands, rough but careful. The moment his skin brushed hers, something sharp passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or the echo of something that hadn't happened yet. "You shouldn't be driving in weather like this," he muttered, glancing at the curve of the road. Lila tried to speak, but her breath trembled. I didn't think it would get this bad." He didn't answer. He just pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and led her toward a pickup truck parked under a crooked oak. Inside, the air smelled of rain leather and faint traces of tobacco. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once, eyes still fixed on the storm. "You live nearby Atlanta, visiting family out here." He gave a quiet huff. "City girl. Figures." That flicker of judgment sparked something in her chest. "You make that sound like an insult." "It's not," he said. "Just means you're not used to dirt roads and bad timing." Lila turned to study him under the faint dashboard light. His profile was all edges and restraint, the kind of man who had learned to keep his distance from the world. But it wasn't hardness she saw there. It was weariness, like he'd been fighting something invisible for far too long. "Do you live around here?" she asked. He hesitated. "I work at a ranch not far from here." She smiled slightly, trying to lighten the moment. "So, you're a cowboy." That earned her the faintest smirk. Something like that. They sat in silence as the rain eased. Somewhere far off, thunder rumbled like a restless god. Lila caught her reflection in the window, a face streaked with raindrops. Mascara-smudged eyes too tired for 28. She looked at him again, this stranger with calloused hands and a name she didn't yet know. "You didn't have to stop," she said. "I know. Then why did you—" He turned toward her, and in that fleeting second, the air between them felt heavy with something unspoken. Because sometimes, he said softly, you help someone before they disappear too. She didn't understand it, not then. But the sadness in his voice wrapped around her like the last note of a song. He offered to drive her to a nearby inn. The road was still slick, the trees bowing under the weight of the storm. She kept stealing glances at him, the scar along his jaw, the way he gripped the steering wheel as if it could anchor him. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was with the quiet certainty of someone who'd lived too many lives for one lifetime. When they reached the inn, he parked the truck but didn't get out. "You'll be safe here," he said. Lila hesitated. "You're not coming in." He shook his head. "Got work early." "What's your name?" "Ethan." "Ethan what?" He looked at her then, a long, unreadable stare. Rainlight flickered across his eyes, gray stormy, but strangely kind. "White," he said at last. "Ethan White." She smiled, though something about the way he spoke his own name felt like a lie. "I'm Lila." "I know," he said. That startled her. "You know," he didn't elaborate. Just held her gaze a second longer, then reached for the door handle. "Don't trust too easily, Lila Brown." His voice dropped lower. "Don't even trust what you think you see." And then he was gone, swallowed by the mist, leaving her heart hammering and her mind tangled in questions. The next morning, the storm had passed. The world outside gleamed like it had been scrubbed clean, blue sky, damp earth, the smell of pine. Lila checked out early, still unsettled by how abruptly he'd vanished. The innkeeper hadn't seen anyone matching his description. No truck, no man. As if he'd never existed at all. She drove back toward town, the road glistening beneath the sun. But halfway down the slope, she noticed something wedged under her windshield wiper. A small folded note, written in hurried, precise handwriting. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what matters. Take care, city girl." No name, no address. But she knew. Her fingers trembled around the paper. For reasons she couldn't explain, tears pricked her eyes. She told herself it was the exhaustion, the leftover adrenaline. But deep down she knew it was something else, something beginning. Meanwhile, miles away in the quiet outskirts of Savannah, a man in a dark suit stood before a mirror, no trace of mud or flannel now. The reflection staring back at him was one the world knew well: Ethan King, tech billionaire, heir to the King Enterprises empire, one of Forbes's 40 under 40, and most recently, the center of an engagement announcement splashed across every business page in America. Except the bride-to-be, Lila Brown, didn't know yet. He loosened his tie, the same hands that had held her trembling shoulders, now spotless and steady. But his eyes were different, darker, conflicted. He replayed the moment in his mind, her soaked hair sticking to her cheek, her laugh cutting through the rain, the way she looked at him without recognizing the face that had haunted news feeds for years. In that moment, he wasn't the billionaire with an empire. He was just a man who could breathe again. But reality was merciless. Tomorrow, he'd be back in boardrooms and photo ops, back to a life where everything, even love, was calculated. He picked up the engagement contract on the desk. Lila Brown, it read in black ink. His chest tightened. He whispered to no one, "You were never supposed to be her." The irony was cruel. The woman he'd fallen for in anonymity was the same woman he was destined to marry by arrangement. He closed his eyes and let out a breath that sounded like surrender. That night, Lila sat by her bedroom window in Atlanta, staring at the same restless sky. The city lights flickered below like 1,000 tiny promises she no longer believed. She had spent her life performing the perfect daughter, the poised debutante, the future wife, in someone else's plan. But for a brief, impossible hour, in the rain, she had been free, and she missed it more than she could admit. Somewhere deep down, she knew she'd meet him again. The question was under which name the air in southern Georgia was heavier than the one Lila had known in Atlanta, thick with the scent of wet earth and magnolia, sweet and wild and unpolished. Maybe that was why she came. Maybe she was tired of everything that looked perfect, but felt hollow. She told her parents she needed space before the engagement announcement. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. When her father's driver dropped her off at the airport, she handed him her designer suitcase and boarded a bus instead. By the time anyone noticed, she was 300 miles away, standing in front of a weather-worn sign that read, "Willow Creek Community Center. Hope grows here." Lila's heart raced as she stepped through the gates. The center wasn't glamorous. peeling paint, crooked fences, kids running barefoot in the dust. But something about it felt alive. For the first time in years, she wasn't Senator Brown's daughter. She was just Lila, a woman with calloused hands and unbranded shoes, trying to learn what her life might look like if it truly belonged to her. She found a job as a part-time assistant, helping organize meals and literacy classes. The pay was small, but the laughter of the children filled the hollow places in her heart. Every evening after the last bus had left, she would walk down the dirt road to her new home, a small rented cottage surrounded by rows of peach trees. The landlord was quiet, almost invisible. He owned the farm next door, where workers harvested vegetables before dawn. Lila didn't see him for the first few days, just the old pickup parked under the oak tree and the faint hum of country music at night. Then one evening, as she was struggling to fix a broken window latch, a shadow appeared by the porch. "You're doing that wrong," a familiar voice said. She froze, turned, and there he was, the man from the storm. "Ethan," she whispered. He looked different without the rain sun on his skin, a faint streak of dirt across his forearm, a quiet steadiness in his posture. But the same eyes, gray, watchful, unreadable, met hers, and for a moment, everything that had been spinning in her life came to a halt. "You live here?" she asked. "I work here," he said, nodding toward the field. "Guess we're neighbors now." It felt like a twist of fate, or maybe punishment. Lila didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. Over the next few weeks, their paths kept crossing accidentally. At first, then less so. Ethan would drop off vegetables at the center, fixing the generator. When it sputtered out, quietly mending things, no one else noticed. Lila would leave coffee on his porch when he worked late. They never spoke much, but silence between them wasn't empty. It was warm, charged, alive. One evening, the power went out. The storm clouds rolled in again, swallowing the sky. Lila found herself at his door, half laughing, half shivering. "Mind if I borrow some light?" He raised a lantern, its glow spilling gold over his hands. "Come in." The cabin was small, lined with old books and photos of mountains, not people. A kettle whistled softly on the stove. He poured her tea without asking how she liked it. Somehow, it was perfect. They talked for hours about small things. At first, the weather, the harvest, the stray dog that kept stealing sandwiches at the center. Then slowly about deeper things. "What brought you here?" he asked at last. She hesitated. "I needed to disappear for a while, running from something, maybe from who I was supposed to be." He studied her in the lamplight. "Most people spend their whole lives trying to become someone else. At least you're honest about it." She smiled faintly. "What about you? Why are you here?" His gaze flickered toward the window, where rain streaked against the glass. "Let's just say I got tired of people pretending to know me." He set his cup down, then added, almost to himself, "Being rich or poor doesn't scare me. Not being free does." The words landed somewhere deep inside her, echoing like a truth she'd always known, but never said aloud. She wanted to ask what he meant, what he was hiding, but the silence that followed was tender, not secretive. Outside, thunder rumbled softly. She felt safe there, dangerously safe. Days melted into weeks. They built an unspoken rhythm. She'd cook dinner, he'd bring over fresh produce. She'd read aloud to the kids at the center. He'd fix the broken fence. People in town started to whisper the quiet man and the city girl. Lila didn't care. One evening, she found him sitting on the porch steps, shirt sleeves rolled, looking out over the darkening fields. The last light of dusk burned orange across the sky. "Do you ever miss the city?" he asked. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I like how time moves here. Slower. More honest." He turned to her eyes, soft. Honest can hurt, though. I'd rather hurt for something real, she said. He smiled, that rare, quiet smile that made her heartbeat stumble. She didn't realize she'd fallen for him until one night when he didn't show up for dinner. The table felt too big, the silence too sharp. She walked outside and found him near the barn shirt, soaked with sweat, his hand pressed against his ribs. Ethan, what happened? It's nothing, he said, wincing. But she saw the old scar beneath his collarbone, raw and red. Instinctively, she touched it. He flinched, then met her eyes. Why do I feel like you're carrying more than you say? She whispered. He didn't answer, just looked at her for a long time, the kind of look that told 1,000 unspoken things. Then he said quietly, because maybe I am. That night, Lila couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, moonlight washing over her face, thinking about the way he'd said it, like a confession, half choked. Who was he really? But even with the doubts creeping in, she couldn't deny what she felt. The world she'd come from, the one of gala dinners, glossy lies, and planned futures, had never made her heart race like this. For the first time, love didn't feel like a contract or an obligation. It felt like breathing. Yet, in that same breath, fear followed. Because what if she wasn't the only one running from a life that wasn't hers? One weekend morning, while organizing supplies at the community center, Lila overheard two workers chatting. You heard about that guy who showed up last year. Works at the old King property. Strange fella. Keeps to himself, but sometimes black cars visit him at night. Lila froze. King property. The name hit her like thunder. The same king from the headlines. The same empire her father admired. She tried to laugh it off, but her hands shook as she packed the boxes. When she got home that night, she stared at Ethan's cabin across the field, its single light glowing faintly. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe not. She stepped outside barefoot, the grass cold beneath her feet. The world felt too quiet. She thought of the scar, the sadness in his voice, the way he'd said her full name that first night, Lila Brown, as if he'd known it long before she told him. For the first time since she'd met him, she wondered if everything between them had been real. The next morning, she found the porch empty, the door locked. The field lay still, abandoned. Ethan was gone. On the table inside her house, someone had left a note, his handwriting again, steady but heavy. Sometimes truth waits until we're brave enough to face it. Don't stop living honestly, Lila. Her hands trembled as she folded it. The ache in her chest was sharp and quiet, the kind that didn't cry, only broke. She didn't know that as she stood there clutching the note, a helicopter was landing miles away, and the man she thought was just a farmhand was stepping back into his other life. Cameras, suits, headlines. Ethan King returns after year of mystery absence, and the engagement announcement, postponed for months, was back on the front page. This time, she saw her own name printed beneath his. The morning Ethan disappeared, the world was eerily quiet. The sky hung heavy over Willow Creek, swollen with the promise of rain, but not a single drop fell. Lila woke to an emptiness she couldn't name at first, the kind that makes you stand still, waiting for something to return. His truck was gone. His tools, his jacket on the porch, even the faint smell of coffee that usually drifted from his cabin, all vanished. The silence felt wrong, unnatural, like a note missing from a melody she'd memorized. She called the center, the hospital, even the sheriff's office. Nothing. He hadn't left a word. No goodbye, no message, not even a lie to soften the truth. That night, unable to sleep, she walked to his cabin. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything was too neat, too deliberate, as if he'd wiped himself out of existence. On the table lay the same lantern, he'd once lit for her, its glass smudged with fingerprints, and beside it, a newspaper. The headline stole her breath: Billionaire Ethan King missing after year of silence. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She read the name again and again until it blurred. Ethan King. The photo below showed him in a tuxedo, clean-shaven, confident, the kind of man who didn't belong anywhere near muddy boots or peach fields. Yet the eyes, those storm-gray eyes, were the same ones that had watched her across a dinner table, across candlelight, across the fragile space between truth and pretense. Her knees buckled. She dropped the paper and pressed her palms against her chest, as if she could physically hold her heart together. The man she had loved was a lie. The farmhand, the quiet neighbor, the man who'd whispered to her about freedom, all a mirage. And worse, the fiancé her parents had chosen for her, the one whose name she had avoided for months, was the same man. Her mind reeled, connecting threads she hadn't wanted to see. The scar on his chest, the way he'd known her full name before she'd told him, the careful distance he'd always kept, not coldness but guilt. Lila staggered outside. The night was breaking into rain, the kind that felt like punishment. She screamed into the emptiness, but the only answer was thunder. The next morning, she packed her things. Every folded shirt, every half-read book felt like a betrayal. She moved slowly, methodically, because moving too fast would mean she'd feel it, the pain, the loss, the absurdity of it all. She paused by the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked older. Her eyes, once bright with defiance, were now clouded with disbelief. She had run from the cage her parents built, only to walk into another one disguised as love. Before leaving, she sat at her small wooden desk, the one where he'd once left her a note about honesty. Her hand trembled as she wrote, "If this love was only a performance, then I bow out before the curtain falls." She folded the letter neatly, placed it under the lantern, and left without looking back. Atlanta was louder than she remembered the city, pulsing with wealth and ambition, the two things she had tried hardest to escape. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, holding microphones like weapons, chasing a story too shiny to resist. She caught fragments of it from car radios and screens in shop windows. After months of speculation, Ethan King, CEO of King Enterprises, resurfaces for the first time since his disappearance. Sources say he is expected to announce the revival of his arranged engagement to Lila Brown, daughter of Senator Charles Brown. Her hands gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. They were writing her life before she could live it. That night, her mother called. The same calm, polished tone that had always hidden sharp edges. "Lila, thank God you're home. You'll need to be at the press conference tomorrow. They'll announce the engagement officially." Lila almost laughed. "Engagement? You mean the one I didn't agree to? The one I ran away from?" "Don't be dramatic," her mother said coolly. "The Kings have waited long enough. This alliance is bigger than either of you." "Alliance?" Lila's voice cracked. "You mean business, control, power." Her mother sighed, weary of emotion. "Love fades, Lila. Legacy doesn't." The call ended with silence, the kind that felt final. That night, Lila lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her childhood room, the same one where she'd dreamed of becoming an artist, a traveler, anything but someone's pawn. She remembered the warmth of Ethan's hands when he'd fixed the window latch, the sincerity in his voice when he said he was tired of pretending. Had it all been false? Or had there been a moment, even one when it was real? The questions tore at her like broken glass. By dawn, she decided she couldn't face the cameras, not with that confusion still burning inside her. So she drove without direction, following the highway south until skyscrapers turned into farmland and noise turned into wind. The same back road, the same oak trees, the same rain starting to fall again. Fate has a cruel sense of humor. At a gas station near the county line, she saw his face again, this time on a television inside. Ethan stood before reporters, immaculate in his dark suit, surrounded by flashes of light. "Mr. King, where have you been for the past year?" a reporter asked. Ethan's lips tightened, eyes hard. "Looking for something real," he said simply. Lila froze. The air knocked from her lungs. He looked different, polished, distant, but when he said those words, something flickered beneath the mask. A tremor of truth. Then another reporter asked, "And what about your fiancée, Lila Brown? Will the engagement move forward?" Ethan hesitated. His jaw clenched. Then, with a measured breath, he said, "That's not for me to decide." The world moved in slow motion after that. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass door, a woman caught between fury and longing, between the life she'd run from and the love she couldn't erase. She turned off the TV, got back into the car, and drove until the road ended. That night, she returned to Willow Creek. The center was closed, the air still thick with the scent of soil and memory. She stood before Ethan's old cabin, now empty and dark, and for the first time since the truth broke her open, she let herself cry. The wind carried her sobs into the trees, soft, raw, almost tender. When she finally stopped, she whispered into the night, "If you ever meant it, even once, I hope you find the courage to prove it." Then she left the letter she'd written, the one she couldn't bear to give him, before under the same lantern where his lies had begun. Far away, in a penthouse overlooking Manhattan, Ethan stood by a window, holding a photograph of a small wooden cabin surrounded by peach trees. His reflection stared back the billionaire, the air, the lie he'd tried to escape. In the background, his father's voice thundered from another room, "She's coming to New York. The announcement proceeds as planned. You'll make this right, Ethan." But Ethan's eyes stayed on the photograph. His thumb brushed over the edges, soft and worn. He whispered almost to himself, "You can't make right what was built on a lie, but maybe you can rebuild." And for the first time, he turned away from the window, toward the truth he'd been running from all along. The ballroom glittered like a dream someone else had written. Golden chandeliers, champagne towers, an ocean of silk gowns and polished shoes. Everything perfect, everything staged. Reporters stood at the back, waiting for the first photo, the first headline, "The Union of Two Empires, King and Brown." The orchestra played a melody so elegant, it felt cruel. Lila stood near the edge of the room, her gown silver and soft, but her face pale against the light. Her mother's hand rested on her arm, an anchor disguised as affection. "Smile. Darling," her mother whispered, "history is watching." Lila's lips curved, but her heart refused. The diamond ring on her finger caught the chandelier's glow, beautiful, heavy, and cold. She had told herself she wouldn't come, that she would stay gone, let the whole performance crumble. But then, the letters from her father's office came, the threats of disgrace, the hints that Ethan had already agreed. Curiosity, or maybe weakness, had pulled her here. She needed to see for herself what kind of man he truly was. Across the room, Ethan stood surrounded by investors and family friends. The black suit fit him like armor. His expression was unreadable calm, in a way that came only from exhaustion. Every camera was angled toward him, every flash slicing across his face like lightning. When his eyes finally met hers, the noise dissolved. He hadn't expected her to come. She hadn't expected him to look at her like that, like someone standing at the edge of redemption and not sure if he deserved it. The speeches began. Her father spoke first, voice booming with pride, painting the union as a symbol of legacy and stability. People clapped at every polished sentence, the applause echoing hollow through the hall. Lila barely heard him. Her pulse was too loud, her mind spinning with fragments of their time at Willow Creek, the quiet laughter, the smell of rain, the lantern light. She kept wondering which Ethan was real, the one in the headlines, or the one who had once knelt beside her, fixing a broken window with calloused hands. When Ethan stepped onto the stage, silence spread through the room. He adjusted the microphone, his jaw tightening as he glanced at the engagement banner behind him. The King-Brown Alliance, a new era. For a long moment, he said nothing. Only the faint hum of the air conditioning filled the pause. Lila felt the air shift. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation. Then his voice came steady, low, and alive, with something no one could name. "I've spent most of my life learning how to build things," he began. "Companies, empires, images people could believe in. I thought that if I built enough, earned enough, gave enough, maybe I'd deserve the world I was given." A few polite smiles, a few confused looks. But the truth is, he paused, eyes drifting to her. "The more I built, the less of myself I recognized." The room stilled. I met someone who reminded me what it meant to be seen without all the noise. She didn't care about my name, my company, or what I could offer. She cared about the man who fixed fences, who got dirt on his hands, who didn't have to perform. Gasps scattered like raindrops. Her father's face turned to stone. Ethan took a breath, his voice deepening. "And I ruined that. I lied to her. I let her fall for a stranger because I was too afraid to be honest." Now the whispers began, journalists shifting pens, trembling over notepads. Ethan reached for his left hand, slid the diamond ring from his finger, and held it under the light. "I used to think I could buy anything. Respect, success, even love. But the one thing I couldn't buy was her trust. And without that," he looked directly at Lila, "nothing I own is worth keeping." He placed the ring on the podium, the sound of metal on glass, ringing sharp and final. "So tonight, I'm ending this farce before it begins. Lila Brown, I'm giving you what I should have given you from the start, your freedom." A collective gasp. Cameras flashed. Someone dropped a glass. Lila's mother gripped her arm, hissing, "Do not react." But Lila couldn't breathe. Her chest tightened, as if the room itself had shrunk. The weight she'd carried for months, expectation, betrayal, grief, suddenly cracked open into something almost like relief. Ethan stepped down from the stage, ignoring the chaos erupting behind him. His father shouted his name. Board members murmured threats. Security hovered at the edges. But Ethan just kept walking past the gold-draped tables, past the floral archway, toward the only door that led outside. For one suspended second, he looked back at her. A silent question passed between them. Not a plea for forgiveness, just truth raw and final. Then he was gone. The fallout came like a storm. By morning, every major outlet carried the story. Ethan King walks away from billion-dollar alliance. The fall of a corporate prince. Stocks plummeted. Board members called emergency meetings. Investors demanded his resignation. His father released a statement calling Ethan's actions emotionally compromised and professionally irresponsible. But none of that reached him. Ethan spent the next days alone, holed up in the small coastal house his mother had once loved. He ignored the calls, the letters, the noise. He didn't care about the billions evaporating from his name. For the first time, he could breathe. At night, he'd walk barefoot along the shoreline, waves lapping at his ankles, remembering her laughter, her stubborn honesty. There were moments he wanted to drive to Atlanta, to stand at her door and beg for a second chance. But he'd already taken too much. He told himself that love meant letting her have peace, even if it meant losing her forever. Leela stayed silent through the scandal. She refused interviews, declined invitations, ignored the whispers that followed her through every corridor of her father's estate. She had expected humiliation, but instead she felt nothing. Just a strange, fragile calm. One evening, as the sun bled through the glass walls of her room, her father came in, his expression cold and measured. "You've humiliated this family," he said quietly. "Do you understand the cost of his foolishness? Of your silence?" She looked up from her seat by the window. "Maybe freedom is supposed to cost something." He exhaled sharply. "You think you've won? You're just another girl who let her emotions ruin everything." Her gaze was steady. "No, father. I'm just a woman who stopped pretending." He left without another word. That night, Lila packed a small bag and walked out of the mansion without telling anyone. The city lights faded behind her, like the end of a performance. Weeks later, in a quiet cafe by the coast, she saw him again. Not in person, on TV. He was giving an interview, looking thinner, quieter, almost human. The reporter asked, "Was it worth it? Losing everything for one decision?" Ethan's answer was simple. "I didn't lose everything. I just stopped owning what wasn't mine." Lila smiled faintly, tears welling in her eyes. Outside, the sea wind carried the scent of rain. She closed her notebook and whispered to herself, "Maybe it's not the end. Maybe it's the beginning of something true." That night, as Ethan walked along the same stretch of shore, he saw a small paper boat drifting in the tide, handmade, fragile. He picked it up, unfolding it gently. On the paper, in familiar handwriting, were just 4 words: "Still learning to trust." He looked out at the horizon, the first hint of dawn glimmering over the water. And for the first time in years, he smiled, not because he'd won, but because somewhere out there she hadn't given up on truth. 2 years can feel like a lifetime, or like a single held breath that never ends. For Lila Brown, it was both. Atlanta had changed, sleeker, louder, faster, but she had learned how to move through it without losing herself. Every morning she walked into the glass-fronted offices of New Roots, a project she'd built from the ground up. The initiative supported women of color in starting their own businesses. Farmers, artists, single mothers, dreamers, with more courage than means. Her name was now whispered with respect rather than scandal. Lila Brown, advocate, host, and founder of New Roots Live, read the magazine covers. Yet behind every poised smile, there was still that quiet ache, the one that never fully left. She had buried the love, but not the lesson. Sometimes when the cameras weren't rolling, she'd find herself staring out the window, remembering the sound of waves and a man's voice saying, "Freedom costs something." Ethan King had vanished from headlines almost as quickly as he'd once dominated them. After the collapse of his empire, he sold most of his shares, retreated from New York, and disappeared from society's glittering circles. In the quiet corners of the Pacific Northwest, a new foundation emerged under an unfamiliar name: Her Voice. No glossy branding, no board of elites, just a network of scholarships and community programs for women whose stories were too often silenced. Few knew who funded it. Fewer knew that its founder still kept a photo of a woman standing barefoot under a Georgia rainstorm tucked inside his wallet. Ethan didn't talk about her. He didn't need to. Every act of kindness he funded, every speech he declined, every smile he offered a stranger, all of it was an apology in disguise. He had once built an empire for power. Now he built for redemption. Their worlds never touched, but sometimes the edges brushed. When New Roots received an anonymous grant that saved a dozen startups from closing, Lila, read the letter attached, For the women who dare to rebuild. A friend of the cause. She didn't recognize the handwriting at first, but the signature, just a small slanted E, made her heart stop. She didn't tell anyone. She just folded the note carefully and tucked it into her journal. The wound inside her chest didn't flare with pain this time. It pulsed with warmth, strange, unfamiliar, dangerous warmth. Still, she said nothing. Some silences are sacred. That summer, New Roots Live launched its televised segment, a series of interviews highlighting women who'd transformed their pain into purpose. Lila's calm, compassionate presence on screen turned the show into a quiet revolution. One episode featured a single mother from New Orleans who'd lost everything in a flood, but rebuilt her life through small community loans. As the woman spoke, Lila felt a lump rise in her throat. After the recording, a producer asked, "What makes you believe so much in people's ability to forgive?" Lila smiled, thoughtful. Because forgiveness isn't about excusing what hurt us. It's about reclaiming who we are without it. The producer nodded, moved. "That's beautiful. You should say that on air sometime." She hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe I will." A few weeks later, during a live broadcast for a charity gala, she did. Standing before hundreds of guests and thousands of viewers across the country, Lila spoke, not from a teleprompter, not from notes, but from memory. We talk a lot about strength, about resilience, survival success. But real strength, she said, her voice steady, comes from forgiveness. The kind that doesn't ask for apology or promise. We're truly strong only when we can forgive even those who broke us. Because holding on to pain means we keep living in the moment that hurt us most. There was a hush in the room. The kind of silence that meant something real had been said. 3,000 miles away, in a cabin by the sea, Ethan sat on the edge of his desk watching the broadcast on an old television. The room was dim, except for the blue light flickering across his face. When she said those words, his hands stilled. He hadn't seen her in 2 years, but her voice, warm, deliberate, unwavering, cut through every layer of regret he had built to protect himself. He leaned forward, eyes fixed on the screen. She looked stronger now, more luminous, not because of fame, but because of peace. She wasn't the woman who had once fled a ballroom in tears. She was something rarer, a woman who had turned heartbreak into purpose. And when she said, "Forgive those who broke us," Ethan closed his eyes. A breath escaped him, half sob, half relief. He whispered, "You're ready." That night, he drafted a letter, but didn't send it. "Lila, you once told me you were tired of being someone else's story. I see now you've become your own. I don't know if I deserve to stand in your world again. But if forgiveness has room for me, I'll find my way back, not as a man asking to be loved, but as one who finally knows how to." E. He folded the letter, placed it inside a book titled "The Weight of Light," and left it on his desk. The ocean roared outside, wild and infinite. A month later, Lila received an invitation she didn't expect. The Her Voice Foundation Annual Summit, Seattle. Keynote topic: the power of rebuilding from silence to song. No sender name, just a date. Her assistant glanced at the envelope. "Looks like they want you to be a guest speaker. Should I RSVP?" Lila hesitated. Her fingers lingered on the card, tracing the embossed emblem of a single white feather, the same symbol printed on that anonymous grant 2 years ago. She smiled faintly. "Yes, tell them I'll be there." The night before the flight, she walked alone through the city streets. Neon signs reflected on wet pavement, blurring like memories. She thought about all the versions of herself. She had been the obedient daughter, the runaway, the lover, the abandoned. Each version had hurt, and each had healed a little differently. she whispered into the cool night air. Maybe the past doesn't fade. Maybe it just waits for us to grow enough to meet it again. The wind carried her words away, but she knew somewhere he might hear them. In another city, under another sky, Ethan stood on a stage rehearsing his opening lines. The Her Voice Summit would be his first public appearance in years. His team had begged him to stay behind the scenes, but this time, he wanted to stand where she could see him, not as the billionaire or the recluse, but simply as a man who'd learned what love could cost. As he looked out across the empty hall, the faintest smile crossed his lips. Tomorrow she'd walk through those doors, and he would finally have the chance not to explain, not to beg, but to tell her the one truth he had carried through every lonely night. The days without us taught me who I was, but I never stopped hoping for the days with you again. The city was a symphony of light glass towers piercing the night sky, yellow cabs flowing like veins through the streets, and the steady hum of a city that never slept. New York was everything Lila once feared, and everything she had learned to face. The New Roots Charity Gala was her biggest event yet, a partnership with global donors to fund education programs for women of color. The ballroom at the plaza shimmered with gold and champagne, the sound of laughter echoing beneath the chandeliers. She had come a long way from the trembling girl in Georgia's reign. Tonight she was composed, graceful, radiant, in a satin gown the color of dusk. But as she stepped onto the stage to give her speech, the crowd blurred. Cameras flashed, voices rose, and somewhere beyond the lights, someone was watching her. The speech went perfectly. Applause thundered through the room, polite and admiring. When it ended, Lila stepped down, her pulse steady, her smile practiced. The night was young, and she needed to circulate to thank donors, to play the role she'd written for herself. Confident, unshaken, untouchable. Until the MC's voice broke through the chatter. And tonight, we extend our deepest gratitude to our anonymous major sponsor whose extraordinary contribution has made this event possible. Lila's heart skipped. Anonymous. Always anonymous. Please welcome Mr. Ethan King. Time stilled. The room erupted into a sea of whispers, heads turning toward the back entrance where he stood. Ethan looked different, or maybe just more real. His hair was shorter, flecked with gray at the temples. The tuxedo fit him perfectly, but it was his eyes, still that stormy gray, that stole her breath. The crowd parted as he moved forward, every step deliberate. Flashbulbs sparked, journalists whispered, but he didn't look at anyone but her. For a heartbeat, she forgot to breathe. 2 years of silence folded into a single, unguarded second. He stopped in front of her, his expression unreadable. The crowd faded into a blur of champagne and murmurs. "Lila," he said softly. She tried to speak but found no words. The air between them pulsed, half memory, half ache. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me," he continued. His voice was lower now, steadier, stripped of the careful polish it once carried. "But when I heard New Roots was expanding, I knew I had to be here." Lila forced her voice to steady. "You could have called. Instead, you let my team find out through a wire transfer." He smiled faintly, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Calling seemed selfish. I didn't want you to think I was buying my way back into your life." Her reply was sharp, reflexive. "And what do you call this? A chance," he said quietly. "Not for us, for what we both believe in." The tension cracked, something fragile inside her. He looked older, but not weaker, like a man who had wrestled his ghosts and learned to live with the scars. Still, the wound between them was deep. 2 years, she whispered. "You disappeared without a word. You watched from a distance, sent money, sent messages through other people, but never came yourself." Why now? Ethan's gaze held hers. Because for 2 years, I wasn't the man who deserved to stand in front of you. I needed to learn how to be." He took a slow breath, his words measured. "I thought distance would make me forget. It didn't. It just made me realize that running away from you was the same as running away from everything I was trying to fix." Her lips trembled, but she kept her composure. "You think words can erase the way you left?" "No," he said. "But maybe they can start something better." The orchestra began to play a slow, wistful melody that shimmered through the room. Couples moved to the dance floor, their laughter soft under the violins. Ethan looked toward it, then back at her. "Dance with me," she almost said no. Every instinct told her to refuse to walk away before he could undo the careful life she'd built. But something deeper, older, rose up inside her, a pull she couldn't name. Without a word, she placed her hand in his. He led her to the center of the floor, his palm warm against her back, the rhythm of the music threading between them like a heartbeat. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The distance between their bodies said everything. The pain, the longing, the quiet forgiveness, neither dared to admit. The city lights streamed through the tall windows, painting them in gold and silver. He moved with her gently, like someone afraid the moment might break if he breathed too hard. For the first time in years, Lila felt time stop. When the song ended, they stood still, caught in a silence too tender to disturb. Then slowly Ethan leaned closer. "You once told me love shouldn't be about saving," he murmured. "You were right. It should be about seeing. And tonight, I finally see you, not as the woman I hurt, but as the woman I never stopped believing in." Her throat tightened. "You say that like it's easy." "It's not," he said. "It's the hardest thing I've ever learned." Their eyes met. There was no dramatic confession, no sweeping kiss, just two people standing in the wreckage of what they used to be, realizing that maybe, just maybe, something still lived among the ruins. Later that night, as guests began to leave, Lila stepped onto the balcony overlooking Central Park. The air was crisp, the city humming below. She thought he had gone, but then she heard footsteps behind her. Ethan stopped a few feet away. "I didn't want to leave without saying thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For reminding me that forgiveness isn't something you ask for. It's something you earn." She turned, her expression calm, but her voice trembling. "And how do you plan to earn it, Ethan?" He looked out at the skyline where the lights bled into the clouds. "By showing up. Not for you, not yet, but for the work we both believe in. Her voice is partnering with New Roots next quarter. I hope that's acceptable." Lila blinked, stunned. "You're serious," he nodded. "It's time to stop hiding behind guilt. Maybe it's time we rebuild, not what we lost, but something new." For a long moment, she said nothing. The wind caught her hair, and for once, she didn't fight it. Finally, she said, "Then let's see if truth can build what lies destroyed." A faint smile curved his lips. "That's all I've ever wanted." As he turned to leave, she called softly after him. "Ethan," he paused, half lit by the city's glow. "Don't disappear again," she said. "I won't." He promised. Not this time. And for the first time in years, she believed him. Inside the ballroom, the orchestra played one last song, something slow, full of longing and hope. Lila stood on the balcony, watching Ethan blend into the crowd, then vanish through the gilded doors. Her heart didn't ache this time. It waited. Because somewhere deep down, she knew this wasn't an ending. It was the pause before everything changed. The morning it began, New York woke to rain. Not the gentle kind that cleanses, but the relentless kind that pounds against glass and makes every sound feel sharper. Lila sat alone in her office at New Roots, watching the rain blur the skyline. The phone on her desk wouldn't stop ringing calls from journalists, board members, sponsors. On her laptop, dozens of emails blinked in red. Each subject line was a knife. Love scandal or charity scam? Did the billionaire buy redemption through romance? Lila Brown, a modern-day mistress, disguised as a mentor. She closed the laptop. Her hands trembled, but her expression stayed still. The world she had rebuilt her foundation. Her credibility. Her peace was cracking beneath the weight of someone else's lies. Outside her door, voices rose, her assistant arguing with a reporter who'd slipped past security. "Ms. Brown won't comment right now. Please leave." Lila exhaled slowly. No, she wouldn't comment. Not yet. Not when she didn't even know how to begin. Because the worst part wasn't the rumor. It was that for a split second, a small, cruel part of her had wondered, did Ethan's generosity make her cause look like a transaction? The story had exploded overnight. A tabloid article claimed Ethan King's multi-million-dollar donation to New Roots was an exchange of passion for power, citing anonymous sources and undeniable chemistry. By morning, every gossip column had picked it up. Her voice, Ethan's foundation, was dragged into it too. Critics called it a front for his personal agenda. In less than 24 hours, sponsors froze funding. Banks called to review transactions. The women who relied on the foundation began texting her, "Will the program close? Will my grant be canceled?" Lila's heart broke reading them. Each message was a plea, and she had no answer. When her assistant finally burst into the office breathless, she said, "He's here." Lila froze. Who? Ethan King. He was waiting in the lobby surrounded by cameras. The same reporters who had hunted her for days now turned their lenses on him, shouting questions, their voices sharp and hungry. "Mr. King, is it true you and Ms. Brown are romantically involved? Did you use New Roots to rebuild your reputation? Are the donations personal or professional?" Ethan didn't answer. His expression was calm but grave. He wore no tie, no pretense, just a dark suit and that quiet steadiness she remembered from before the world knew his name. Again. When he saw her emerge from the elevator, the crowd shifted. The noise softened, anticipation thick in the air. Lila stood there, spine straight, chin lifted. The weight of betrayal and exhaustion pressed down on her, but she wouldn't let the world see her break. Not again. He met her eyes for a moment, a silent question. "Can I speak?" She gave the faintest nod. The press conference began in the same ballroom where they had once reunited. Cameras lined the back wall. Journalists leaned forward, ready to pounce. Lila stepped to the podium first. Her voice was clear, though her pulse trembled beneath her ribs. 2 years ago, she began, "I founded New Roots to help women reclaim their stories. Today, someone tried to rewrite mine." A murmur rippled through the crowd. She continued, "What was built on truth cannot be destroyed by lies. Still, I stand here not as a victim, but as a woman who refuses to be shamed for the partnerships that make change possible." She paused, steadying her breath. Ethan King's contributions to New Roots were made publicly, legally, and with full transparency. To imply otherwise is to insult not only me, but every woman who has ever dared to dream beyond what society allowed. Applause scattered across the room, soft, uncertain, but growing. And then Ethan stepped forward. He didn't take the podium. Instead, he stood beside her. The room erupted again, flashes, whispers, questions overlapping. Ethan raised a hand, silencing the chaos. His voice was low but carried like thunder. "Let's make one thing clear," he said. "This isn't a scandal. It's a story about fear. Fear that a woman and a man can work together, respect each other, love each other, even without someone calling it a transaction." Gasps. The room froze. He turned toward her, then not for theatrics but for truth. "If loving a black woman means I lose everything I built, then I'll lose it all again, because that love made me a better man." The words fell heavy and electric, echoing through the hall. Cameras clicked furiously. Some reporters were already typing headlines. Others simply stared stunned. Ethan looked back at the crowd. "You want a story? Here's one. I was a billionaire who learned that power without principle is worth nothing. I gave up the company my family built because it didn't align with what I believe anymore. From today forward, I am no longer CEO of King Enterprises." The crowd gasped again. Lila turned sharply to him, shock flashing across her face. He wasn't done. "I'm joining New Roots not as a savior, not as a donor, but as a partner. From now on, her voice and New Roots will merge as one foundation. We'll fund women-owned businesses, education, and healthcare for communities that the world still chooses to ignore." Chaos broke loose. Reporters shouting, executives dialing phones, sponsors whispering furiously. But none of it mattered. Lila was staring at him, tears welling, disbelief and admiration warring inside her. For years, she had carried the weight of being doubted, diminished, dismissed. And here he was, risking everything to stand beside her, not above her. Her throat tightened. When the noise became unbearable, she reached for the microphone. Her voice trembled only once. "Thank you," she said softly, looking straight at him. "For finally understanding that love isn't about saving, it's about standing." He smiled, small, tired, real. And just like that, the wall between them, the class, the color, the past crumbled. After the conference, the storm of media continued for days. Some praised them, others mocked. Board members resigned. Sponsors hesitated. But the public, especially women, rallied behind them. Donations doubled. Messages poured in from across the country. "You've given us hope. You've made us believe again." One night, weeks later, Lila found Ethan alone in the empty office. He was staring at the city lights, tie loosened, exhaustion carved into his face. "You've lost everything," she said, quietly. He turned, smiled faintly. "Not everything." Lila stepped closer. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," he said, "because if I didn't, no one else would believe we were equal in this fight." Her eyes softened. "And what if I told you? You didn't have to prove anything anymore." Ethan's gaze held hers, steady, tender. "Then maybe it's time we start believing that together." The clock ticked softly in the background. Outside, the rain had stopped. Lila reached out, taking his hand, the same hand that had once pulled her from a ditch in the middle of a storm years ago. No words followed. None were needed. The silence between them was no longer made of regret. It was made of peace. And for the first time, she knew trust wasn't something you gave once. It was something you rebuilt, brick by trembling brick, until it could hold the weight of love again. 1 year later, spring came to New York, carrying both warmth and memory. The city was alive with renewal. The streets blooming with tulips, the Hudson glimmering under a soft sun. Inside the grand atrium of the Metropolitan Hall, the air was charged with anticipation. The banners read, "King Brown Foundation Building, Futures Changing Histories." It wasn't just a charity gala. It was the birth of something larger, a union of purpose, legacy, and love. Lila stood backstage, her palms slightly damp, her breath steady but deep. Through the curtain, she could see the crowd leaders, journalists, young women from every background, whose lives had been changed by New Roots and her voice. And at the center of it all, Ethan. He stood at the podium tall and calm, speaking with that quiet conviction she'd come to know so well. He had shed the armor of wealth long ago. The man before her wasn't the billionaire she once hated for lying. He was the man who had learned how to tell the truth, even when it cost him everything. A year ago, Ethan said to the audience, his voice steady, "We decided to merge two dreams, one built from privilege and one built from struggle. Together they became something that neither of us could have achieved alone." Applause filled the hall. He smiled, a soft curve that reached his eyes. "Today isn't about me," he continued. "It's about her and the women she represents. The ones who teach us that leadership isn't about standing in front, but standing with." The spotlight dimmed slightly, and the crowd turned as Lila stepped onto the stage. Her gown was simple white, with gold stitching that caught the light like sunlight on water. She didn't walk like a celebrity or an heiress. She walked like a woman who had earned her peace. The audience rose in applause. Cameras flashed, but Lila saw only Ethan. His gaze soft, proud, a little awed. "Thank you," she said, her voice low but firm. "A few years ago, I thought love was something fragile, something that couldn't survive truth. But now I know. Love doesn't need to be perfect to be real. It only needs to be honest." She paused, her eyes locking with his. "And this foundation, this partnership, is our way of keeping that honesty alive." The crowd cheered. Yet beneath the celebration, something trembled in the air, a sense that something more was coming. Ethan turned toward her, holding a folder in his hands. It was sleek, leather-bound, marked with the foundation's emblem in gold. He smiled faintly. "There's one more document to sign," he said, into the microphone. The audience chuckled lightly, assuming it was part of the ceremony. Lila tilted her head, confused but intrigued. Ethan opened the folder, slowly pulling out a single sheet of paper. "This one's a little unconventional," he said. "It's not about funding or partnerships. It's personal." He read aloud. Contract title: The King Brown Lifetime Agreement. Term: forever. Value beyond measure. Position: Mrs. King. The crowd gasped and then erupted into laughter, applause, and a few tears. Lila stood frozen for a heartbeat, her breath caught between disbelief and joy. Ethan stepped closer, no longer speaking into the microphone. His voice softened, carrying only to her. "We've built foundations, healed wounds, and fought storms. But there's one thing left. I haven't built our forever. So I'm asking you, Lila Brown, will you sign this last contract with me?" Her eyes filled with tears. She had once run from this love exposure surrender. But now she understood true strength wasn't about standing alone. It was about choosing who you'd stand with, even when the world was watching. She took the pen from his hand, her fingers trembling. "You've finally learned how to negotiate," she whispered. He smiled. "Took me long enough." She signed. The ink glistened under the stage light, and when she looked up, he was already on one knee. "Mrs. King, may I make it official?" Lila nodded, laughing through tears. The hall exploded into applause. Cameras flashed. People stood, some crying openly. When he slipped the ring on her finger, the moment felt suspended in eternity. Ethan rose, pulled her gently into his arms, and kissed her slow, tender. The kind of kiss that carries the memory of every fight, every forgiveness, every second of becoming whole again. The sound of applause swelled into a wave. The chandelier lights reflected on the marble floor, catching the shimmer of tears, diamonds, and hope. Later that evening, when the crowd had gone and the stage was quiet, Lila and Ethan stood alone in the empty hall. The banners fluttered slightly in the air conditioning, the echo of their laughter still hanging above the silence. He took her hand, their fingers fitting together easily now, like something inevitable. "Do you ever think about how unlikely this was?" she asked softly. "All the time," he said. "But then I remember everything worth building starts with risk." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "And what about the next risk?" He smiled. "We'll take it together." She looked up at him, curious. "What's next?" He hesitated, then said, "The foundation's going global, but not in New York. I've been offered a chance to open a community center in Cape Town." Her eyes widened. "That's halfway across the world." He nodded. "It is. But imagine the lives we could change there." A quiet beat passed between them. Then she said, "Then I guess we'd better start packing." He laughed softly, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "I love you, Mrs. King." She smiled. "That's Mrs. King Brown. Some contracts can be amended." As they walked out into the night, the city lights shimmered against the river, like scattered stars. Their shadows stretched long across the marble floor. Two figures joined, not by circumstance but by choice. The press would call it the wedding of redemption. The tabloids would call it the billionaire's second chance. But to them, it was simply the moment when love stopped being a story and became a promise. Love does not erase difference. It honors it. It does not fix the past. It redeems it. And in a world still learning how to listen, sometimes, love must speak loudly enough for everyone to hear. "If the world insists on dividing us," Ethan once said, "then let's build something so powerful it reminds them we were never separate to begin with." Outside, the city roared with life, and somewhere deep within its hum, two hearts beat in quiet unison, stronger, freer, forever intertwined.